Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Luis Fernandez. After a year without a budget, North Carolina lawmakers pitch and pass a 600-page, $34 billion spending plan in just 3 days. WRAL's NC Capitol team explains the winners, losers, the weird bipartisan way the vote broke down, and what is still to come before state employees see long-awaited raises. Here's Caroline Yaffa and Will Doran for this week's On the Record.
Hey there, it is the NC Capitol team over at WRAL. I am Will Doran.
And I'm Caroline Yaffa.
And it has been a whirlwind couple of days with the budget. It became public on Tuesday.
Yep.
Then they started voting on Wednesday. Then they finished the votes Thursday when we're recording this, just a couple hours ago.
I know,
it feels like bam, bam, bam.
It feels like a really long week, but it's done, it's passed, and now it's heading to Governor Josh Stein's desk.
Yeah, and he talked about it today. He had a different bill signing event. Reporters obviously were asking about the budget, and he said, I'm still reviewing this. You know, there are some things I like in it, some things I don't like in it. And I think it's fair to say there's some things he doesn't even know about, because that's the case for all of this. Like I said, it only became public on Tuesday. We're all still trying to figure out what this does, what this doesn't do. So he's going to, take the holiday weekend, read through it. We're going to be doing the same.
Definitely. I mean, 600 plus pages, but he has 10 days to sign it once it reaches his desk. He either sign it, veto it, or he could leave it blank without a signature. And then after those 10 days, it just becomes law. So
right.
He has some options, and it's going to be interesting what he does, because, I mean, we'll get into the process and what happened this week during debate, but some Democrats supported it and some didn't. So I wonder, it's kind of a 50-50 if he signs it or not, right?
This was one of the weirdest mixes of budget votes I've seen in a long time, because you had Republicans voting against it, which hasn't happened in years, and then you had about close to half of all the Democrats in support of it. So it was just this strange mix, really, of both bipartisan opposition but also bipartisan support, and probably just speaks to the fact that there's so many different things in this. We didn't have a budget for the entire last year, so they really had to catch up, do a whole lot of things. And there's, every single speech we heard from every single, even Republican budget writer said, look, I don't love everything that's in this, but overall, we think this is a good bill. We hope that it's going to get bipartisan support. And in the end, it did. It passed with well more than a veto-proof majority. So, while the governor can veto this, you look at the numbers and you say, I don't know if he even has the numbers to sustain a veto.
Totally.
If he were to.
It'd be interesting if he signs it into law versus not. Like, he could leave it blank because there's so many things in there he just doesn't want to touch or doesn't want his name to, be associated with. So that'll be kind of interesting to see what happens there. So we'll be following that for sure. So stick with us on that one.
We've heard hours of debate between the Senate and the House combined. There's probably been 15 or 20 hours of people talking about this. So this YouTube video is not going to be that long. But you and I have sat through it all, and we heard a lot, some of the highlights of it, the lowlights according to the critics. But we also heard people talking a lot about the process. And, like we mentioned at the top, how just this rushed effort to get this through. And that was something that, it bothered some Republicans. John Bless from Greensboro stood up and said, he's been in the legislature forever. And he said, I've never liked this. I still don't like it. I think it's terrible. But he was about the only Republican who complained about the process. But we heard a lot about it from the Democrats. What do they have to say?
Totally. They were really upset by this because a lot of them said that they weren't involved. I mean, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like this was a very different budget process than normal, in the sense of, like, Democrats, even though Republicans have close to a supermajority, it's like they're not really super involved in this. But I think in previous versions, Robert Reeves said in a House gaggle to reporters, was talking about how he, in the previous House budget proposal, he had some say and he worked with the speaker a little bit on this. But he was like, we really were not involved. And Sidney Batch, the Senate Minority Leader, said the same. So I think they were upset that it just showed up Tuesday, same time to them and to the public, that it was unveiled. They wish they were more involved in this. But I think because it took so long, this was very much a Republican and House Speaker Dustin Hall and Senate Leader Phil Berger issue. I think they needed to just work through this to get a budget quickly.
And that's something that, gets talked about here in the building a lot, but I think people in the public don't even know. Not only were the Democrats cut out of this process, probably 60 to 70 to 80% of the Republicans
Oh,
were
absolutely,
too. I
yeah.
mean, this is a very small group of people who are meeting behind closed doors to just hash this out and just kind of trade. And it's not just spending. You know, we saw a lot of just policy in this budget that has nothing to do with money, but it's all part of the trade. And they say, oh, well, you know, okay, you want that, you know, $1 million for the new fire truck in your district, but, you know, I have this bill about, you know, banning people from using bots to grab up tickets on Ticketmaster.
Yeah.
And so we'll give you that, you know, fire truck if you know, I don't know. That's
No,
the
it's
exact
true,
conversation
though.
that happened, but those things are both in the budget, so are a million other things.
And a
you know.
million earmarks. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so many different things going to specific counties that representatives and senators wanted. I think.
Yeah, $1.6
Yeah.
billion worth of, you know, some people call them pork projects
Yeah.
in the budget. And some of them are things, you know, like, you know, sprucing up state historic sites that it's like, okay, that's, you know, a function of the state government. Others are like, let's just hand out some money to some, you know, private company or nonprofit, or, you know, just pay for some sheriff to do something that, you know, isn't really the job of the state, but the state does it anyways.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I feel like going into more of the weeds of what's in it, we talked to you about that. When was that? Tuesday, when the budget was unveiled. So don't forget to watch that and make sure you like and subscribe, obviously. But like some of the things that are also in it are those state employees, teacher raises and bonuses. I think, I mean, there's so many things in it, and there's so many different things that some people wanted, others didn't. And that was also another thing that Democrats were upset about, were how much that they were upset with what the raises looked like. And Speaker Hall said that too. He was upset with how little raises people were getting.
Yeah, that was a big contention, the raises, the taxes. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, like I said, we've talked about that a ton. There's so much in this budget. So, you know, if y'all who are watching this, have tips
Yes.
or suggestions of stuff that we should be looking into, we would love to hear from you. Email us. If you know us, call us. But we've been doing a lot of reporting on different little pieces of it. You know, I wrote a story about the cuts to legal aid, which is a legal nonprofit that funds help for low-income people who, most of them are either facing eviction or they're victims of domestic abuse, trying to get a protective order. They do all sorts of other stuff, you know, people who have been displaced by hurricanes, people who have been scammed, all sorts of kind of civil legal work. They're losing millions of dollars in the state budget. And that was a case where the state budget didn't even say the words legal aid ever, but just, you know, kind of through the way that, you know, different legal language is interpreted, it had the effect of cutting their budget. So there's all sorts of things like that that are kind of, I don't want to say tricky, but, you know, don't always do what they seem to appear to do. So, you know, we could use everyone's help figuring out what's in this. Lawmakers could use everyone's help. You know, we're all texting each other saying, have you read this? Have you read this?
Or like command effing and seeing like what words are in it. But again, there's stuff that it's hard to find. And something about sports betting taxes. I mean, that was something that Brian Murphy has done a lot of coverage on, part of the NC Capital team. So make sure you look at his stuff too. But I think sports betting companies and operators are upset by this because they're going to be taxed more. I think
it's a pretty big boost. It goes from 18% now to they'd pay a 23% tax rate.
It's huge, and it's just more money. I think the general gist of this, which makes sense, North Carolina Republicans and lawmakers want more money going to the state and more money giving back. So I think that that's just something to look at. As the state's growing, that's what they're looking for, and I feel like most states are probably like that. It just depends how much more, you know.
Plenty more in taxes. I'm going to hit a couple real quick that I think are of major interest. The prediction markets, like Kalshi, Polymarket. We are going to become, if this budget passes, the first state in the country to formally recognize those and to authorize them to work here. And what that means is that we can also start taxing them. But they're only going to be taxed at 6%, unlike that 23% tax for the sports bettors. So that caused a lot of consternation in the debates today. Some other things, data centers are losing a tax loophole that they've enjoyed for years. And that's something that actually Governor Stein called for originally months ago. I wrote about that when he asked the legislature to get rid of that tax loophole for data centers, and they agreed. So that's gone, that's in the budget. There's also getting rid of some tax exemptions for hospitals. You know, so there's all these little things in there that, you know, $10 million here, $50 million here, it adds up. And
Definitely.
they needed the money to pay for those raises and the big capital projects like Poe Hall. We've been telling people at WRAL for years about Poe Hall, which is the building on NC State's campus where so many people who worked there, studied there, have gotten cancer. This budget has $180 million in it to deal with Poe Hall. So, anything you can think of, really, the state government is often involved in, and we're seeing it all in this budget. It's a big
there's
document.
also stuff that's not in the budget. I mean, we've talked so much about baseball not being in the budget, but that doesn't mean that they won't touch it. Lawmakers do come back July 27th, and they're saying that we don't really know exactly, but we're expecting that maybe it's for technical changes in certain budget language, which is possible that they can still address. But maybe they're going to touch some reserves. There's like $1 billion of money that they are not touching, and they're saying that it's for like a reserve fund, which means it's just like unspent funds that they can look at maybe if there's a bad hurricane or the state needs more money for something. But there's also baseball that could be touched. The speaker said something about it. So it's possible, but he also kind of like went back a little bit today and was like, no, we didn't promise that it was for baseball or say that it was for capital projects, because Democrats are calling for more resources in schools, some different stuff for helping for roadways. So we don't know what it's going to be for, but maybe when they come back, they'll be talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It turns out that not the only thing holding this budget up for the last year, but a big part of it was this fight over baseball. And should we be publicly funding a stadium to try to get MLB to Raleigh? And very different opinions in the Senate versus the House. There is that $1 billion still sitting around. But, baseball, their expansion isn't happening for several years. So, even if it doesn't happen this summer, there is still time, but also it could be dead. We just don't know yet.
Totally, and Senator Berger is on his way out. He's leaving in the end of December, at the end of the year. So, and he loves baseball. I mean, we talk about baseball, so who knows if that's where he'll want his legacy to end. I think that plays a factor, and he's a really key part of this legislature. Been around for a really long time, been a leader for forever. So,
thank you to Caroline and Will for that conversation, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Find the latest North Carolina news on our YouTube page. Just search WRAL. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.